Recent kidnapping of nearly 300 school children from a school in Katsina in Nigeria has placed the focus on security in that region. Boko Haram claimed responsibility for that. But Islamic insurgents are not the only terror residents face. They also have to deal with marauding Fulani Herdsmen and criminal gangs or bandits. Amnesty International estimates more than 1,000 people were killed in the first half of the year. Let's delve into this issue with Akinolo Olojo from the Institute for Security Studies. A very good morning to you. Why are we seeing such a dramatic uptick in violence in the country? What's going on?
Thank you for having me. No, indeed, it's the problem of banditry, especially in the north-west of Nigeria. It's one which has prevailed for quite a while. So what we saw recently with the abduction, the mass abduction, in fact, of school children, is one which really just highlights, the problem even more. So it's one which has been there for a while. And I think the first thing is that it shows that the scale of insecurity, not only in the northwest, but in the northern region, has widened. The frequency has increased. And this also, points to the fact that we're looking at a region in the country where, schooling rates are not quite encouraging. I mean, this is what happened. The abduction happened in a state called Katsina. And, when you look at Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics, when they publish figures on poverty levels, in terms of relative and absolute poverty, deprivation levels in general, we see that that region where this state belongs to or is situated actually doesn't measure quite well. So there's a problem of deprivation, and a lot of people are vulnerable when it comes to governance gaps. And this is something which the government has to really prioritize and try to address. Otherwise, the problem of banditry, of abduction for ransom, and even violent extremism, in general in the northern region is likely to continue.
Yeah, I mean, it's a region that feels that it's been overlooked for the rest of the country, and you're absolutely right. They've got to tackle the grassroots issues here, and how not to do it is what the government is doing, is just sending in the military. I mean, it's not actually their job.
Indeed. I mean, one thing we have to realize is that the problem itself, it's one which is really deep-rooted. It's been long-standing for a while. And the knee-jerk reaction, sending the military, while it has its utility, of course the military has a role to play. The security agencies have they have a role to play. But then this is a multi-dimensional problem, and it requires multiple levels of management. So we've mentioned the issue of deprivation and governance gaps. And what does this mean? It means that the leadership, not only in the respective states in that region, but also at the federal level, has to prioritize, addressing governance gaps, deprivation levels. There is also the problem that has to do with ideology, when we speak of insecurity related to Boko Haram, because we must not forget that that is also in the background. It's also happening in the northeast. But then the likelihood of it spreading to other zones in the country, especially the northwest, is one which is really possible. And I think it's good to remember again as well that Nigerians actually voted into office the president, because of three things. One was for him to address the economy. The second was for him to address corruption. And the third, and perhaps most important, was to address insecurity. And so far, we've seen that these problems have persisted. And somehow, I think the leadership not only needs to implement policy frameworks that have already been put in place, but to do it with a sense of urgency.
And you wonder why he hasn't tackled it. I mean, it seems from the action that we're seeing recently that Boko Haram, if anything, is reinvigorated.
Indeed, I think the political will is one which is really key here. I mean, a lot of good research has been done on trying to highlight the problems, whether it's in regard to violent extremism, in regard to banditry or abductions in the country. I mean, the Institute for Security Studies, which I work with, there's a lot of sound, empirically based research that has already been done. And a lot of, policy direction, there's a lot of good data that has been, directed to policymakers. So it's really about implementation. So it's about the leadership recognizing this and also trying to, exercise the political will to implement what has already been produced in terms of data. So I think this is really key.
Does Nigeria need a hand? I mean, the African Union, what sort of role can organizations or bodies like that have there? What sort of conversations need to be had?
Well, that's a very good question. The problem of violent extremism, for instance, is one which has a very transnational character. So we're not just looking at Nigeria. We're looking at, we're looking at Niger. We're looking at Chad. We're looking at Cameroon. So the African Union already has endorsed, the multinational joint task force, which has actually been, very active in the northeast of Nigeria since 2015. So the AU already has played a role to some extent. The countries neighboring Nigeria are also playing a role in terms of the multinational joint task force. So I think that transnational aspect is already in place. But then, because the problem is one which has lingered for quite a while, it's also going to take quite a while as well for it to be addressed. But then the leadership in Nigeria and as well, the neighboring countries need to work, in a more coordinated manner in terms of, peace building, humanitarian assistance, in terms of, addressing, the conflict, the root causes and governance challenges.
Akinolo Olojo, good to talk to you. Thank you.